Welcome to Timeless Wisdom. Today we explore a Zen master's teachings on the power of words and self-perception. Subscribe for more insights and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Enjoy the journey into profound wisdom. A master once told his disciple, "A single word can lift a heart and a single word can shatter a soul. Be mindful of what you speak, for your words shape the world." In a time when men sought wisdom in mountains and silence, a young seeker wandered into a monastery, eager to learn the ways of Zen. He had read many teachings and heard many sutras, yet his mind was clouded by doubts. One day he asked the master, "Master, is it true that words have power?" The master smiled and pointed to the river flowing behind the monastery. "Look at the water. It flows freely, yet it carves mountains over time. So too do words shape the mind, the soul, and the destiny of the one who speaks them." The seeker bowed deeply, feeling the truth in the master's words. Then the master leaned in and said, "There are 3 things you must never say about yourself in public, for they will chain you, blind you, and weaken you." The seeker's curiosity burned bright. "What are they, Master?" The master placed his hand on the seeker's shoulder. "Listen carefully, and let these words carve wisdom into your heart, as the river carves the stone." And so, the master began his teaching. I am not enough, the trap of self-doubt. The master led the seeker to an ancient tree, its roots deep and strong. He touched the bark and said, "This tree does not question whether it is worthy of sunlight, nor does it doubt the nourishment of the earth. It simply grows." The seeker frowned. "But Master, humans are different. Sometimes we feel we are not enough." The master nodded. "And that is where suffering begins." He continued, "To say, 'I am not enough,' is to plant a seed of self-doubt in your mind. When you declare this in public, you water that seed with the approval of others, making it grow stronger." "But Master," the seeker interjected, "is it not good to acknowledge our weaknesses?" The master smiled. But acknowledging weakness and branding yourself as unworthy are not the same. One is the path to wisdom. The other is a cage built by your own hands." He then told a story. Long ago, a man wished to learn the way of the sword. He went to a great warrior and said, "Master, I am too weak and too slow. I am not enough to be a great warrior." The master simply handed him a sword and said, "Then fight as you are." For years the man trained, always believing he was too weak, too slow, and so his sword was always hesitant, his movements always uncertain. One day a young boy approached him and said, "You fight well." The man shook his head and said, "No, I am not enough." And so the boy believed him and walked away. The master sighed and said, "You have imprisoned yourself with your own words. If you say you are not enough, you will never be. If you let others hear it, they will believe it too. Let go of this thought and fight with all that you are." The seeker listened carefully. "So, Master, by saying 'I am not enough,' we convince both ourselves and others that we are weak." The master nodded. "Yes, the river does not say, 'I am not strong enough to reach the ocean.' It simply flows." I have nothing to offer, the illusion of emptiness. The master then took the seeker to a quiet hall filled with empty bowls. He picked up one and said, "What do you see?" "An empty bowl," the seeker answered. The master flipped the bowl upside down. "Is it still empty?" "Yes." The master smiled and filled the bowl with tea. "Now it is full," the seeker admitted. The master took a deep breath. People often say, "I have nothing to offer." This is the same as looking at an empty bowl and forgetting that it can be filled. He continued, "No one is truly empty. Even in silence you offer presence. Even in stillness you offer peace. To declare yourself empty in public is to turn your bowl upside down, refusing all that could fill it." The seeker pondered this. But what if someone truly feels they have no worth? The master laughed gently. A man once sat under a tree, convinced he was worthless. A wise monk walked by and gave him a small stone. "Take this to the market and see its value," the monk said. At the market, a fruit vendor saw the stone and said, "I will give you 10 coins for it." The man shook his head and went to a jeweler who offered 100 coins, but the man still did not sell it. Then he took it to the king's palace. The king's jeweler examined the stone and gasped, "This is a rare gem. I will give you 10,000 coins." The man ran back to the monk and said, "How is this possible?" The monk smiled and said, "The stone did not change, only the eyes that looked upon it did. Do not judge your worth with the wrong eyes." The seeker felt a deep realization settle within him. "So, when I say I have nothing to offer, I am refusing to see my own value." The master nodded. "Exactly. Never say this in public, for it blinds you and others to the gifts within you." "I will never change," the curse of stagnation. The master led the seeker to a flowing stream and pointed at a rock sitting in the water. "This rock has been here for centuries, unchanged, but the water moves on, shaping the land. Which do you think truly lives?" "The water," the seeker said without hesitation. The master smiled. "Then why do people say, 'I will never change'?" The seeker thought for a moment. Perhaps because they fear change. The master nodded. To declare that you will never change is to turn yourself into the rock. It is to resist the natural flow of life. If a tree refused to change, it would never bear fruit. If the seasons refused to change, there would be no harvest. Change is life. He then told a final story. A man once sat at the edge of a river, mourning his past. "I have made mistakes. I can never change," he sighed. An old fisherman heard him and said, "Come, step into the river." The man did so, and the fisherman asked, "Is this the same river from a moment ago?" The man hesitated. "No, the water has moved." The fisherman nodded. "Then why do you think you cannot change?" The seeker closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. "So, Master, by saying, 'I will never change,' we resist growth." "Yes," the Master said, "and resistance to growth is resistance to life itself, the depth of words, and the path to liberation." The seeker sat by the river after leaving the Master's presence, contemplating the 3 lessons he had received. The words echoed in his mind, each one revealing layers of wisdom he had not fully grasped before. He closed his eyes and allowed the gentle murmur of the river to guide his thoughts deeper, breaking the chains of "I am not enough." The Master had said that to declare oneself as not enough was to forge shackles with one's own words. But why did people feel this way? Why did he too sometimes doubt his own worth? He thought back to moments in his life when he had compared himself to others, times when he had seen great warriors, wise monks, and skilled poets, believing himself to be far lesser. And so he had whispered to himself, "I am not enough." Yet, as the Master had said, the tree does not question its worth, it simply grows. The river does not hesitate before flowing, it simply moves toward the sea. Every blade of grass, every bird in the sky, every star in the heavens, none of them seek permission to be what they are. Only humans imprison themselves with doubt. The seeker realized that the moment he had told himself he was not enough, he had built an invisible barrier within his mind. Every opportunity, every challenge had been met with hesitation, not because he lacked the ability, but because he had convinced himself that he did. But what if he simply removed that thought? He opened his eyes and whispered, "I am as I am, and that is enough." The wind carried his words across the water, and for the first time he felt something within him loosen, a weight he had unknowingly carried for years, uncovering the hidden treasure within. The Master's second lesson had been about the illusion of emptiness, the belief that one has nothing to offer. The seeker considered this carefully. How many times had he stood among others and remained silent, thinking he had no wisdom to share? How often had he held back his skills, believing they were unworthy? He had seen the great works of poets, the disciplined strokes of calligraphy masters, the fluid grace of martial artists, and each time he had thought, I could never be like them. But then he remembered the story of the hidden gem, the stone that had seemed worthless until it was seen by the right eyes. Was it not the same with himself? Had he not measured his worth through the eyes of those who did not understand its value? He placed his hand on his chest and took a deep breath. His heart was beating, his mind was thinking, his spirit was alive. Was that not proof enough that he had something to offer? He thought of the river once more. Even the smallest stream nourishes the earth. Even the quietest raindrop feeds the thirsty soil. Could it be that even the smallest action, the simplest presence, held meaning? He had spent so long searching for worth in great achievements that he had ignored the value of his mere existence. A butterfly fluttered past him, landing on a nearby stone. It did not need to prove its worth to the world. It simply existed. And in doing so, it brought beauty. Even I too can offer something, the seeker whispered, watching the butterfly take flight. And just like that, the second chain around his heart began to loosen, embracing the flow of change. The seeker's mind turned to the final lesson, the false belief in permanence, the illusion that one cannot change. How many times had he thought, this is just who I am, I cannot be different? How many times had he resisted learning something new, stepping into the unknown, because he believed he was incapable of change? He looked at the river, remembering the Master's words. The river was never the same from one moment to the next, yet it never ceased to be a river. It did not fight, yet it did not remain still. The river did not fight against its nature, but it also did not remain still. Was he not like the river? Was life itself not like water, always moving, always shifting, yet always present? Then he understood. The only thing preventing change was his own belief that it was impossible. He had imprisoned himself in an identity carved from past experiences, rather than allowing himself to grow into something new. Could he not become stronger, wiser, kinder? Was there truly anything stopping him besides his own mind? He stood up, feeling the earth beneath his feet. The air around him felt lighter, as if the world had been waiting for him to realize this truth. He whispered to himself, I am the river. I can change. And with that, the final chain broke. The ultimate realization, the power of words, the freedom of silence. The seeker now understood why the Master had warned against saying these three things in public. To say, I am not enough, was to chain the self. To say, I have nothing to offer, was to blind the self. To say, I will never change, was to weaken the self. Words shape reality. Thoughts spoken aloud become beliefs, and beliefs shape actions. If one speaks of weakness, one will live in weakness. If one speaks of emptiness, one will see only emptiness. If one speaks of stagnation, one will never grow. But the opposite was also true. To speak of possibility is to invite growth. To speak of worth is to uncover hidden treasures. To speak of change is to allow transformation. And yet, the greatest wisdom was not in speech at all. The seeker thought of the Master's smile, his quiet gestures, his deep understanding. The Master did not declare his wisdom, he simply lived it. The tree did not need to say it was strong, it simply stood firm. The river did not need to say it was flowing, it simply moved forward. Perhaps the wisest path was not to proclaim one's value, but to embody it. The seeker took a deep breath. He would not need to say, I am enough. He would simply live as though he were. He would not need to say, I have something to offer. He would simply give. He would not need to say, I can change. he would simply flow like the river. With that final understanding, he smiled. The weight he had carried for so long had vanished, not because he had fought against it, but because he had let it go. The river continued its endless journey to the sea, and now so would he. That concludes our video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing for more insightful content. Just click the subscribe button below and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any updates. Feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts or suggestions for future videos. See you in the next one.